Welcome to the Ellevate Podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate Podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella Herrera. Hi, Maricella. How are you doing these days?
Hey, Kristy. Doing well. Just got back from London visiting my family, and I'm a little jet lagged. So I was up, at 5 a.m. eating chocolate. So that's how my day has been.
Well, that feels like a great way to start your day. So that might be a habit to get started. Chocolate every morning for breakfast.
I don't know. I probably shouldn't do that. However, it was a very delicious, huge Cadbury chocolate, because when you travel, why would you not buy the massive chocolates? You know, the ones. So I had to have one of those. And that's what I was having for breakfast at 5 a.m.
Well, that sounds fun. And welcome back. It's great to have you back stateside with us.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not going to lie. I didn't want to leave.
I know. Oh, I know. I mean, being with family and in a different place, and it's, there's all the things we've been deprived of for so long.
And I got to meet my baby nephew, who's only 2 months old, and he is the cutest little baby boy ever. And so I don't know. I'm also 38, so you can imagine all my thoughts about babies. It was really nice. It was really nice to be with family.
Did you do night duty?
I did not. I did not do night duty. I did not change diapers. I entertained while diapers were being changed. I led dance parties.
All right.
Walked around and showed him all the things he's going to break when he gets older. But no, he actually was a good sleeper.
That is very fortunate. That is great. And I'm sure that you were and will continue to be the favorite aunt.
I hope so. I think I'm the only aunt.
Well, I know my kids favor you. You're their favorite, so.
Yay. Haven't seen them in a long time, though.
Soon. I know soon. They miss you, and they owe you lots of hugs for that cool puzzle you got them for the holidays.
I mean, everyone, if you haven't looked up 3D puzzles, I'm like, they're so good.
Yeah, I mean, well, they really, I think, expand your perspective because as you're putting them together, the view changes depending on where you're standing. Like each tile, because it's 3D, or each piece of the puzzle can look many different ways, and then the colors are more rich, and so it was fun, and it was Star Wars, which is Morgan's favorite. So
I mean, of course,
you really knocked it out of the park with that.
It had to be Star Wars. I mean, obviously, but it's an interesting analogy. The 3D and how things look in different perspectives, because everything can look a little different if you just turn your head a little bit to the side.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, we talk to our kids about that all the time, and I think about that in the world, and just how oftentimes our perspectives can be very binary and very stationary, and how we need to do more to turn our heads, if you will, and see things through a different lens. And there's a lot of power in that, and I think it's critically important, particularly for business leaders, for allies, advocates, just citizens in this world, to kind of push ourselves to keep evolving our perspective and looking at things in different ways.
Yeah, we forget sometimes.
We do. Have you seen the news about the Marvel's new movie coming out?
Oh, I think it came out already, right?
Oh, did it?
Yeah, the Eternals. Also, isn't this the one with the first gay Marvel superhero?
Yes.
Well, yeah, different perspectives matter. And I've been thinking a lot about representation. I don't know if I told you, but I'm going through a phase right now where I'm watching all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies in timeline order. So basically starting back in the day with Captain America, I'm currently at Ant-Man and the Wasp. So getting very close to Infinity War and Endgame. And yes, I am a nerd. Yes, My pajamas may or may not have Captain America, a cat version of Captain America on them.
Well, so which one's your favorite?
Of the superheroes?
Yeah.
Thor. I'm a big Thor fan. I think he's cool. He's an otherworldly god. However, though, I haven't seen the newest Marvel films, which is what I was going to mention. So, since I am watching them in Timeline Universe, I still haven't seen the last one that came out, which was Eternals. It just hit Disney Plus, came out in theaters last year. And the really cool thing about this, and what I'm very excited about, is that this is the one that where Marvel really is pushing the boundaries and showing representation of individuals that they usually don't. So in Eternals, you have the first openly gay superhero. I'm not going to say the first LGBTQ superhero because that would be Loki. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch Loki. It's very good. But more than anything, they have Lauren Ridloff paving the way as Marvel's first deaf on-screen superhero, and it's kind of amazing. And when the news came out that this was going to be part of Eternals, the rise in internet searches for people wanting to learn sign language rose 250%. So with just one little bit of representation, you got so many more people wanting to change their perspectives and learn a little bit more about others. So how powerful is that?
I mean, it really is. And media has a big role to play in our perspectives. And this podcast does too. I mean, we're really proud to bring conversations and perspectives to the forefront through the Ellevate Podcast that can help our listeners to learn, to grow, to question some of their preconceived notions, to continue to learn from others. And across the spectrum, I mean, we've been talking about this more and more, which is an incredibly important conversation of who you're listening to in podcasts or the news, who's represented in the books you read, in the shows and the movies you watch. It's on all of us to continue to push ourselves to be exposed to those different perspectives. And I know that there's been increasing calls for some time now for the movie companies and TV studios, directors and beyond to use their power to really diversify the stories that they're telling. And I think we have a long way to go there, but some of these first, particularly within Marvel's Eternals, is a really good sign that change is happening.
Yeah, she's the first Black deaf woman superhero in a major picture series. Because one of the things is, when we talk about the media, yes, there has been push for more women to have speaking roles, which we've been hearing it for years. Now it's more people of color, more individuals that may have a disability, more just in general intersectional identities being represented. But the problem is it's still very much so in kind of more indie, low budget films. So seeing this on a huge production is heartening.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. This is so exciting.
So imagine how bad I feel that I can't freaking watch the movie yet.
Wait, so then how many more do you have before you get to Eternals?
I think I have Ant-Man and the Wasp, Thor Ragnarok, which is one of the best Marvel movies ever, Infinity War, Endgame, and then Shang-Chi, and then Eternals. So 6.
Okay. Maybe we'll have...
I'm getting there. I'm 20 down.
Yeah. Well, it's maybe you'll have some binge sessions with your jet lag.
Yeah, I'm sure I will.
5 a.m. chocolate and Thor.
So do you remember when we used to do our anniversary things for Ellevate in New York in June, and like in the summer, and we would have like the big photo stations with props?
Uh-huh.
I may or may not have kept our Thor hammer. So if anyone's looking for it, it may or may not be in my apartment.
Okay. Well, now we know where to find it. That's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about our guest today. Our guest is Audrey Hametner, and she is the co-president of Ellevate Dubai. So for our listeners who are familiar with Ellevate, and if you are not, you absolutely should be. We are the largest community of women in the workplace, and we do a ton of great things, bringing you together with your peers in a virtual setting through our squads and our roundtables. But we also have our hyper-local communities in 40 locations around the world who are continuing to support women within their cities, to bring them together, to network, to open the door to opportunity, to support one another, and of course to see business evolve and be more inclusive. And so Audrey is the co-president of our chapter in Dubai, but she's also the founder and CEO of two companies, the Bedrock Program and THG Advisory. The Bedrock Program is a career coaching practice that specializes in career coaching for teens and young adults. And THG Advisory Group is a risk operations and governance advisory that works with SMEs to manage risk, improve operational efficiency, and improve longevity through strong governance. And Audrey and I talked a lot about shifting perspectives. We talked about career paths and how to support future generations. And her story is really amazing and inspiring. So I'm excited to hear what y'all think about my conversation with Audrey.
Can't wait to hear it. She's great.
Audrey, hello and welcome to the Ellevate Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Kristy. I'm honored to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here, and you and I know each other through Ellevate. You are a leader in Dubai and really helping to create community for professional women, and doing an amazing job of it. So thank you so much for the shared passion that we have of really creating change and support.
It's important. It's important to me, especially as an expat, that we have this space for ladies, and I have been really enjoying having that opportunity to provide support and guidance for the ladies as I've had it for myself. So thank you.
So Audrey, could you share with our listeners a bit about you and your story?
Sure. So I'm a British Canadian, raised in Toronto. I'm the oldest of 7, so I guess I've always sort of had a lot of the expectations of success or doing well to set the stage for my siblings. I have 3 sisters and 3 brothers and a large family. And well, my career sort of started in finance after I graduated with in the University of Toronto, and it wasn't expected that it would start off in finance, to be honest. I actually expected to go out and join the UN and change the world. And I got a job in a telecommunications firm doing budgeting. So it was a bit unexpected, but at that time, an opportunity came up, and I like order, and I had a little OCD about things like making sure things are properly budgeted and taking care of projects, and it was just sort of a natural fit. So yeah, my sort of journey started off in the finance field, which was completely unexpected, and it sort of followed a normal pattern like everyone would expect. You start off in budgeting, and you move into FP&A, and you manage some accounting, and then became an account manager. But I would say in about 2005, I got bored of being home, and wanted to sort of explore and see the world. So I left Toronto and went home. I put that in quotations, to London, England, and there life just changed. I took my passions into the wind and traveled, and I met my husband, who didn't marry till 4 years later, but nonetheless, and then decided to get my MBA. So in 2009, in the height of the financial crisis, I finished my MBA, left my job as a director of finance, and took on a role in finance operations for what was then small media technology firm called Kit Digital, which grew exponentially since then. and relocated back to New York. It's now called Pixel, and took a role there in financial operations. So that was the beginning of my foray out of pure finance and into operations. Yeah, about a year after I took that role, I went into M&A and started looking at integration of new acquisitions, analyzing them, traveling more on that side of the business. And then about a year and a half later, took on the role as Vice President of Global Business Operations, which was really exciting. Very, very enjoyable role with the, my first decent sized P&L type thing. And about 4 years later, had a baby. First child, had that first real hiccup in your career, when you think, I'm ready to have a child, but I'm not ready to take a step back. So that was the big change for me. I ended up moving in with my husband. Before that, we had lived in separate cities. He was living in Germany and I was living in Prague. And in 2014, he had an opportunity to move to Dubai. So I said goodbye to my career and did the expat wife thing, moving to Dubai, and I've been here ever since. It's been an interesting journey.
I mean, how was that pivoting your career and your life in such a way? I mean, what were some of your learnings during that time, and any advice to share for our listeners who, especially during this time, we're hearing more and more about different career pivots and life changes, and it can seem very overwhelming.
It's not as smooth as you plan for. That's probably the first thing I'm going to say. I'm a planner. So I start off life with plan A, and in my back pocket, I have plan B, C, D, E, and F. And when I first decided to have kids, I knew I wanted to have them sort of, before you're 40, that sort of thing. And I had all these grand visions of, being that superwoman and doing it all. And I would have to say that the first thing I learned was to give myself some space and time, because I realized you can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time all the time. And that was a really hard lesson for me, because I had to step back at times and be comfortable with a different role outside of what I thought, my traditional experience should allow me to have. I had to take a step back financially when I wasn't working and rely on my husband, which, was not even something on the table at the time. I sort of thought I would get pregnant, have the child, and then be back at work and be right beside him, paving the way forward. And I kind of had to sit back and say, well, what's more important for me at this time? And, we sat together and for the first time in our marriage together, we had to look at our union as equals, but different. Up until then, it was like, you make the same money I do. Actually, I made more because I was older, but that's okay. And then all of a sudden, we had to sort of say, okay, we're still equals and we're still giving equally to the union, but we have to do it in different ways because we have different and important functions that complement each other. And then when my children were old enough that I felt comfortable that they could go to nursery, then my focus was on how do I bring my career back to where it was. And, being in a city that you have no network, no career network in, that was pretty tough.
I really resonate with that comment around value of, contribution to the family or division of that. And I think about that a lot, actually, because, at Ellevate, we talk about equity and equality in the workplace, and the gender pay gap is one big shining example of inequity. And, how does that then translate into the home? Do we value the amount of money each person brings in with then the amount of time they can spend on work or the time they can spend on other things, versus if you make 20% less than your partner? Are you then contributing 20% more in the home? Does that, and there's other gender roles and stereotypes that feed into all of that. But it's inspiring to hear that, you had that type of frank conversation around just the work that each of you do, the value that you bring, and it not being tied solely to, income, because we know there's a lot of inequities there.
Yeah, we have the conversation, we have the common understanding, but that doesn't take away from that feeling within, that feeling of I've I've gone out and gotten my education. I've excelled at my education. I continuously build on my education. For me, education is a lifelong passion and it will never stop. And yet I'm not making that money. Like that frustration does still rear its ugly head, even though I know that my children are well balanced and they have a mother who loves them and can focus on what they need, as well as a career that is now giving me fulfillment. But there's a time period in between where, it really, what you're doing is the right thing, but it can still eat you that, you judge yourself by what you had thought previously, and you also take into account or fear what other people from a career perspective might be looking at or thinking. That doesn't go away. You just have to continue to keep the course of what's important to you and remind yourself, and hopefully have a spouse that reminds you that your contribution is still equal, even though it's different.
Yeah. No, it's also true. And what was that experience like for you as you were contemplating returning to the workforce? I mean, what were the questions you asked yourself, and how did you approach that?
I think the hardest part is I am not a workaholic per se, but I am a very hard worker, and I love rolling my sleeves up and getting lost in my work. And I had to split myself, and I had to decide early on, how much am I actually going to get back into the world of work that I had before, and how much am I going to focus on and keep my eye on the ball when it comes to the family. Because, let's be frank, you're dispensable at any job you have, but you're not dispensable with your children. And the impact you leave on them, and on their growing up, lasts a lifetime. And beyond that, right? Because your children parent the way that you parented them, and then their children then parent the way that you parent them. And so for me personally, knowing that my husband was sort of, taking on the bulk of responsibility financially, it did two things. One is it freed me up to start to look at what it is I truly want to do, and whether or not there's any pivoting or changing in my career that I'd like to explore. And also it gave me the opportunity to sort of sit down and say, okay, but what type of a career mom do I want to be? Because I have a daughter and a son. And it was really important for me to sort of sit there and say, okay, for my daughter, I want to show her that a woman can do it. If you set your mind to it and it's really what you want, go for it. But to my son, I wanted for him to see that, we are equal. I have this role, Papa has that role, but look, I can also do that role, right? Don't pigeonhole by what you see and what you think because of what you've experienced. And, he's the older one, so he had the benefit of me being home for majority of the time. And he had the hardest adjustment to me going back to work. But he also, was old enough for us to sit down on the couch and cuddle and talk about what it meant and why it was important. And, for him to sort of start to put the pieces together and say, okay, so it's not just Papa who goes out to work. You go out to work when I'm at school. And what does that look like? And but you're still there when I come home, or you're there to pick me up, and you know, how does that work? And so it's really nice. But those are some of the things I had to think through.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's I think about I grew up with the oldest of four. I'm a twin, but we were the oldest, and my parents both worked outside the home. And then, I think about that a lot now with my kids, because like, how much do they understand what you do and why you do it and the decisions you make. And I try to engage them with my work all the time. They've been on the podcast before, but they come to the Mobilized Women's Summit, and I've tried to really have those conversations, and in part because I want them to understand my full life, and what all the pieces to that. And I want to give them inspiration for the future too, when they look to define their own identity, and however that takes shape. So it's great that you're having those conversations.
Yeah, it's important because I grew up in a scenario where, for many years of my life, my mom worked. And then she met my stepdad, and he worked and she didn't. And then she had 6 more children. And then at some point, she felt like it was time to get back to work. And seeing that transition, and then, being responsible, or seeing my responsibilities grow to take care of the family, it all sort of created a mismatch of what a home life should be, because I had friends whose moms never worked, I had friends whose both parents worked. And in some respects it was nice because it gave me the flexibility to know I had choice. And you know in university, and sort of during that time when I was deciding how I wanted my life to unfold, everything is always about choice. And I think I was acutely aware that I have choice for me, but when I had children, I was acutely aware that I have to expose them to the same thing, to the fact that they will also have choice. And the confines of how we live, and the society and the cultures that shape us, are confines that we create in our minds, because we are now in a position in our lives where we know we have choice. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is. We haven't always had that choice, and today many people still don't have a choice, whether to work or not, or where they can find employment. But to be able to teach our children how to identify those areas where they can be in control and where they can have a choice at any stage, you feel more in control of that destiny, and of where you want to go. And I know you work with a number of teen and adults now. How does this conversation factor into today's youth?
So yes, I mean, I have two. I'm sort of always torn with a yin and a yang of self. So still have my traditional business advisory, and so forth. But in one of the roles that I held here in Dubai, where I was head of operations in a school, I realized that I needed to get back to that sense of purpose that I had when I was younger, where I wanted to change the world and make the world a better place. And having children made me realize that it's the youth that I wanted to start with. And when I actually spent time thinking about how I would want to influence them and build the skills that made me feel comfortable that I could do this for my kids as well, coaching came up, but more specifically around building confidence, and building a future. And I talk about, I always have a plan, and I always have my, plan A, B, C, D, E, and F. And yet at the same time, it's always about which plan in which time frame will give me the most confidence to continue moving forward with it. And so it made sense for me to focus on the youth that don't have that. Either they don't have the mindset, that growth mindset, to look ahead and feel confident that they have choice, even if their current situation doesn't feel like they have choice, and to help them develop those plans, A, B, C, D, E, and F, for themselves by starting off and understanding who they are as a person and what they have to offer society from their own value set, not from mine or not from their parents and not from their teachers or not based on having an A in a math class, right? It's about really and truly grasping what's important to you, because those core values never change over time. They're always there. What you do in life is a consequence of your experiences and your upbringing and all those other things. But when you actually sit down and think through why you wanted to be what you wanted to be when you were young, or the influence you wanted to have at that stage in your life, and then you sit back and you ask yourself, now, are those things still important? The core of those generally don't change. And so helping youth understand what that core is early and keeping that cognizant awareness of it helps them make decisions that, when they're older, it guides the principles towards what they want to do. It might not make them do anything in particular, but the idea is that at the end of the rainbow, or the end of that time for themselves, when they're 40, 50, 60, and they look back, they'll see how that thread was there and how comfortable with the life that they've created for themselves they are, as opposed to having just chased money without having anything behind it. So I think in the end, it all kind of flows through that way. And knowing that that is a part of who I am allows me to feel comfortable about giving that to my kids and sharing that with the wider community.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about my own journey. Times have changed too. I grew up in a tiny, tiny little town in New Jersey. I mean, my high school graduating class was 64 kids, and my sister and I were two of the 64. And we didn't have internet then. We didn't have exposure to, my dad was a dentist, my mom was a nurse. I didn't know anything outside of that, and didn't really have people to talk to about it. And then my first job out of school is investment banking, and it was similar to you, finance, as an English sociology major. But I just kind of fell into it. I was very lucky and just happened to get that role. And so there's a lot now, where I put it into context with my own children, and they have exposure to, different careers and different industries and, technology, where they can access so much information, and the landscape has changed so much. And so in that framing of how things have changed, when you go back to kind of your values and what drives you and what you're passionate about, it makes so much sense, because it's like the world changes rapidly. Things are always different, but it's like, what inspires you, what gets you out of bed in the morning, and then how do you find that in the work that you do?
Yeah, I think it's important, and I tell this to not just the youth that I work with, but also to the adults that come to me and are seeking those higher messages. The expression of your core values are going to change. How you present it based on the opportunities and the experiences around you are going to change. What's important is that you can find, or you can identify, two things. One, why you want to endeavor to be involved in what you're doing, right? And two, what is it that you're getting into that you don't want to do? Right? So often people look at everything that they want out of a situation, and by the time they realize what's making them miserable, it's too late. So by identifying and knowing your boundaries, or setting those in scope, you give yourself flexibility to adjust to that changing landscape you're talking about. You give yourself the permission to say, you know what, this is not traditionally kind of how I would have done this, but I see how it relates. I understand. So, for instance, I tell you that I have this OCD about things being organized and doing things in a particular way, and I was in finance operations. And then I tell you, I run an operations risk advisory business. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, but then I also can say, but I have a deep-seated love and wish to have a positive impact and change the lives positively for people going forward. And one would say, but those two don't mix. And I would say, well, I have a transformation in business mindset, but I also have a transformation in self mindset. And now I have two separate companies in which I'm able to do both and love what I'm doing and support people who are supporting me to make that happen on both sides. And you can. You can find a way to live your values, and not everyone's going to do it the same way. One of the things that I absolutely love is a quote by Csikszentmihalyi, and he says, a joyful life is an individual creation that cannot be copied from a recipe. It's not about doing it the way other people do it. It's about identifying what you need and what's important to you and just going with it. Just make it happen. And if it looks unconventional, so be it.
That's perfect and inspiring. And yes, I think that that's the message we always want to leave our listeners with, which is there's no one way to do it, right? This isn't baking the perfect cake. This is your life. And it's about the ingredients and the makeup that works for you. But just, constantly, I think, I want to say holding yourself accountable, and maybe that's right or wrong, but, this is your life. And it's easy to kind of take a back seat sometimes. Maybe that's what we need on multiple levels, but always knowing that you can steer it in the direction that makes sense.
It's true, and that's where you give yourself the comfortability to change direction. Take a step to the left or the right every once in a while. Put your original plan keep it in motion if you'd like, or put it on pause. It's fine, and explore something to the left or the right, because you know where you're going to go anyways, and that shouldn't stop you from enjoying something different. And that fear that we always have of, like, if we leave course, we'll never come back. But of course you can come back. And I don't know, I feel like people get stuck or worried about goals or concepts that other people have put in their heads as being the way you do things, and then they're miserable.
Yeah, I mean, I do think about that quite a bit because growing up, I was similar to you, but I was very type A, and raised my hand for a lot of things, and I was president of this and president of that and treasurer of this, and I was always doing many things, and I see that in my son now. He's 12, and I mean, he's coming off of a pandemic where things were so restricted, and so he's back in school for the first time in over a year and a half, and he's meeting new kids, and he every day is like, I'm joining the soccer team, I'm joining the basketball team, I'm joining the baseball team, he's just wants to do everything. And so part of me is, oh, slow down, you don't have to do it all. But then I understand, it's through trying and doing and experiencing that you more fully understand what matters and where you thrive.
Yeah, and it's also, falling when you do those things and laughing at yourself and being exhausted and then coming to the realization on your own that maybe you've put too much on your plate, and then having to sit down and then, identify what you want more than others or what you're willing to put on the shelf for the time being, and being okay with making that decision yourself. And so often as kids, they don't get a chance to do that. So when they're adults, they really don't know how to be comfortable doing that. And I can tell you firsthand that, it took me a long time to be comfortable with my love of everything and everything. Right? I mean, I have done almost every sport out there, and I've worked in different industries, and I've done different things, and I've loved it all. And, sometimes people say, well, but, you know, you a jack of all trades. And I'm like, well, no, because I have a common thread. It's just, I like to put that common thread in a bunch of different things. But at times I do have to sit back and say, okay, I'm tired. I'm going to put this on. That was fun. And I'm going to put it on the shelf and leave it here for now. And be okay with that.
Audrey, this has been such a great conversation. I want to switch gears a little bit and do a quick lightning round and ask you some questions, get to know you a little bit better. So, are you an early bird or a night owl?
Oh, definitely early bird.
Who would be your dream dinner guest?
Emerson?
Good one. Do you have any pet peeves?
People who are not straightforward. Drives me nuts.
A favorite recent read?
The Conscious Parent by Dr. Shefali.
And any final thought you want to leave with our listeners here today?
I guess I would think about my favorite quote, which is from Emerson. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. The world we live in is just so wonderful because we all have something to offer. And every time we try and put ourselves in a particular box in order to make a success that someone else has given us a thought about, we do ourselves a little bit of injustice, and it took me a long time to get there and to be comfortable with that idea. But I think that we find greater success when we just allow ourselves to be a little bit messy in how we get there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the Ellevate Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me, Kristy. I really enjoyed it.
All right, Maricella, welcome back. What did you think of that conversation?
That was awesome. Audrey is really great. And, we were talking about shifting perspectives at the beginning of this podcast. And I kept thinking as I was listening to the work she does, like, it's so important. It is so ingrained. It's the same as ingrained in Ellevate. And as part of one of our leaders around the world, that's something that's really deep down in her values. So it's really, really cool to listen to her story.
Yeah, I do. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I just really appreciate the impact the podcast has on my life. Being able to learn from others and know that there's not one perfect way to do things, and we are oftentimes faced with hard decisions throughout our career and our life, shifting priorities, but being able to talk about that more transparently, to know that there's not one right way to make that decision or to approach those situations. I think it's what we all need to hear more of. And I'm telling everyone listening today that you're doing a great job. You can do it. Be unapologetically happy and be unapologetically you. And we're here to champion you every step of the way.
I love it. And if you need some of that great energy and that championing, join us at one of our upcoming roundtables. We do them every week. There are different ones for different groups of people, different stages in your career, and you'll get a very big dose of energy, understanding, advice, getting to know some really great people.
Yes. Yeah. The executive roundtable, we're going to be talking about getting playful, building connections, creativity, and joy into your workplace. And in this kind of mid-year winter rut, I think that's something leaders really need to be mindful of as we want to keep our teams motivated and inspired now and moving forward.
And those executive ones are Tuesdays at 1 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
I host the Rising Leaders Roundtables on Thursdays at noon Eastern, and we're going to be talking about getting comfortable with discomfort. We've been going through a list of interesting topics, from saying how and when to say no to going from peer to boss. So I'm really excited about getting to this point of like just in general discomfort and how we can manage that a little bit better.
Yes, I mean it's an important topic, I think, to keep exploring because it never necessarily goes away, and it's just understanding how to best navigate those times. And at our Entrepreneur Roundtable, we will be talking how to convert clients at every speaking engagement. This is a must attend. As someone who does a lot of speaking, I know it's oftentimes hard to talk about what you do. So how to talk about what you do, your expertise, and use that platform to help grow your business too, is really important. You put a lot of time and effort into those speaking engagements. So how do you make the ROI more palatable?
Awesome. Yeah, it'll be good. And talking about more of our things we discuss in this podcast, we have a few firsts to celebrate. As we've been saying, we will be calling out firsts for women. It is something that is still happening. Like, women are still breaking barriers, and we're happy about that, even though, we wish there weren't any more barriers. But we can celebrate along, and would like you to celebrate along with us. We need a better name for the segment. So if you have any ideas, email us at podcast@ellevatenetwork.com. But in the meantime, I can tell you that Rita Freeling became the first African American and first woman mayor of Gettysburg.
And Justice Aisha Malik will become the first woman in Pakistan's history to be a Supreme Court justice.
That's really awesome. Rachel Balkovec became the first female manager in minor league baseball by taking over the Yankees' low A team.
Woohoo! Yay!
That's very cool. I've read some news stories about her, and she is incredibly cool.
Yes, we had Amy Schneider became the first woman to win $1 million on Jeopardy! If you haven't been paying attention, Amy is breaking barriers left and right and is truly an inspiration.
And I am so happy I get to say this, but Maya Angelou became the first Black woman to appear on a U.S. border. Yes. I feel like that needs huge celebration music.
I'm going to be searching my change every time I get it from now on. So I'm going to hoard them. I cannot wait to get a Maya Angelou quarter.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, this has been a great episode of the Ellevate Podcast. We hope you will join us back here next week for a conversation with Rushika Toshian, who is an award-winning inclusion strategist and author of Inclusion on Purpose, an intersectional approach to creating a culture of belonging at work. See you next week. Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate Podcast on iTunes, give us 5 stars, and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at EllevateNTWK, that's Ellevate Network, and become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.